Hi, and welcome to the Punk CX podcast. My name is Adrian Swinsko, and I'm an advisor, best-selling author, speaker, and general explorer when it comes to customer and employee experience. I'm really interested in figuring out what it takes to build organizations that produce better outcomes for both customers and employees. So with that in mind, I seek out and interview CEOs, entrepreneurs, business and tech leaders, authors and academics to uncover some clues about what it takes to build such an organization. Now, some of you may know the podcast as the Rare Business Podcast, but I decided to rename and rebrand the podcast recently. This is for a number of reasons. First one was to mirror the title of my book Punk CX, which was published in June 2019. 2, because I'm a fan of punk music. And 3, it's just more fun, right? If this is your first time listening to one of these interviews, then hello and welcome. Please do dive into the archives at adrianswinsko.com, as I've now completed over 300 of these interviews in the last few years. If this is not your first time listening, then welcome back and thank you. So welcome to the next edition of the Punk CX podcast. With me today, I have Dan Frohn, who is the Chief Marketing Officer, or otherwise known as the CMO, at Sendoso. Hey, Dan, how you doing?
Doing really good, Adrian. Thanks so much for having me today.
You're very welcome. Now, Dan, for the benefit of our listeners and our readers, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and also about the work that you do?
Sure. So Dan Frohn, as you mentioned, CMO at Sendoso. We are a sending platform, and essentially what that is direct mail, gifting, and swag management at scale in a modern way that connects with your tech stack. We also handle all of the warehousing and logistics, so we take that burdensome part of packing boxes, storing things off your hands, so you can really just get it into your B2B sales, marketing, and customer success process.
Cool.
Go
ahead. Sorry, I was about to interrupt, but that's very rude of me. But go ahead, please.
As for me personally, I'm just I'm doing what I love, which is marketing and sales development, and living in sunny California and enjoying life as best I can.
Perfect. Now, Dan, I am a huge fan of things like, handwritten cards, like physical stuff that we can use to create kind of like interesting and memorable moments that also can help kind of differentiate, our brand's experience, particularly in a very crowded and noisy kind of marketplace.
Yeah.
I mean, can you tell me a bit more about, you talk about Sendoso being like a sending platform. Can you tell me a bit more about how Sendoso helps clients do that? And the sort of, and what sort of response rates do you get normally compared to like other marketing mediums, like kind of email? Because right now, because we're recording this in, towards the middle of May, we're still in virus outbreak, of like lockdown. And the number of emails that are getting sent out is going through the roof right now. So I just wanted to kind of come back to kind of what you're doing and tell me a little bit about kind of how you do it and the sort of things that you get involved with, just to give us a bit more sort of like color to kind of what you do.
Sure. So, I think you mentioned the thing that we're all thinking about right now, and that's COVID, right? And I think the big thing is that COVID, a post-COVID world is not going to be the world that we just left, right? We're gonna have this hybrid world where people are going to be working remotely a lot more often, where there could be a rise in COVID cases in the fall, and we might have to be more locked down again. So I think to your point around digital, everyone has gravitated towards email and ramping up their digital advertising because business travel's really not a possibility, and a lot of events and field activities that we all know and love are not around anymore. They're all digital as well. So our whole premise in terms of like direct mail and gifting has always been from day one around rising above that digital noise. So
Mm,
like to your earlier point is like, how do you put an offline touch point in an online world?
mm,
And really the goal there is to make it more personal, right? Anyone can send an email, anyone can go and research what university you go to and start off um, an email campaign looking like they've researched you, but to take the time to actually curate an offer or you know, type up a message that's then handwritten and sent to your recipient really brings you above that noise, uh,
mm.
and really helps you to connect with your audiences in just a different way.
Yeah,
Uh, you know, I think you nailed it in terms of, you know, typical email in good times is what, like a 20% open rate, and if you're lucky, maybe a 2.5% response rate.
hmm,
And we, you know, pretty firm believers that sending is part of, you know, your sales or your sales development or your CX strategy is incorporating that handwritten note or that gift, or even in these times like an e-gift
mm.
um, as part of that email is where you really see the lift in response. So typically, you know, depending on what the campaign is or what the strategy is, we see anywhere from like 4 to 8x response rate when you coordinate it.
Right.
And then as a standalone strategy, I mean, I know you and I have talked in the past about direct mail and just how successful it can be. I mean, those response rates are anything from 20, 40, 50, 60% direct mail response rate, depending on how refined your audience is and what the offer is.
Yeah, I mean that's great. I mean, the thing I really like about the idea of doing something which is physical, whether it's swag related or a handwritten note or kind of whatever, is I think when you talk about something physical, there's also this added dimension that it becomes like a social object, right?
Yeah.
It's like something arrives, and it's almost a bit like everybody gets emails right now, but very few people get a lot of mail, and
Yeah.
actually kind of mail that kind of captures their attention. Somebody opens something up and goes, oh, and everybody's like, you know, people that are next to them are a bit like, wow, what's that? And oh,
Yeah.
that's cool. Or, and I think that's there's a reach beyond just the person as well, which I think
Yeah.
is really interesting. Um,
Yeah.
but can
And
you go ahead? Sorry.
I mean, and I think to your point, like surprise and delight and just those kind of moments matter even more now than in the past, just with, you know, there's so few social opportunities now with everyone kind of being working from home and having to reduce their social circles for social distancing, that
Yeah.
if you can get something that puts a smile on someone's face, then you're that much more likely to connect with that person.
Absolutely. So, I mean, in order to kind of bring this to life, I mean, can you give me a couple of examples of, you know, brands that you've kind of worked with, you know, what sort of campaign it was, what was the problem they were facing, and also the sort of results that you've helped them generate? Because um, I guess I mean, you guys are taking you know, a technology-led approach to something which is effectively like old school kind of marketing, right? Direct mail. And I'm a great fan of the idea like if it ain't broke, don't really fix it. I guess what you've done is you've kind of like, you know, like those car programs on the TV, you've taken like an old banger and you've kind of jazzed it all up so it becomes more kind of like 21st century, as it
Yeah.
were. But I mean, can you bring that to life for us? Because I think it's just interesting because I think direct mail, it feels like like a poor cousin in the kind of the marketing mix right now, but it can be really effective. And that's what I wanted to shine a light on, really.
Yeah. So I'll give you two examples, and one is actually a digital example. So we have a customer by the name of Lessonly,
Hmm.
and uh, when COVID hit, a lot of the events that they were doing were canceled, and they had to move to online events.
Hmm.
So oftentimes we think of direct mail and gifting as really a physical strategy,
Hmm.
but they actually used e-gifts as a way to get people incentivized to attend their
Right.
virtual events. And they had something like a 60% attend rate, which is pretty large. A lot of like on 24, I was talking to them recently. They do a ton of virtual events, and in the past, 40% was like a really good benchmark for a virtual event. And now if you get 20%, you're lucky because there's just so much digital fatigue.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so kind of that e-gift touch really incentivized. I think they did a choice of donating to charity or buying yourself lunch. So I think a lot of people in these times, if they are fortunate enough to have a job, like it's an awesome opportunity to go choose a charity and feel good that you did that, right?
Sure.
And then
Sure,
I
sure,
think, a physical example is a customer of ours called Terminus. They're big in the account-based marketing world, and um, you know, account-based marketing, I think, is a fun topic for marketers because we geek out on the technology, but at the end of the day, it is a lot of process and workflow. And if you really want to punch through that conversation and resonate with people beyond just like your core marketing operations audience, they cooked up an idea called the ABM Cookbook,
uh-huh,
where they actually really beautiful direct mail kit that included an ebook with all kinds of different account-based marketing strategies, as well as some giveaway items within the box.
mm-hmm.
So that when that did arrive, it wasn't just something dry about ABM. It was a fun cookbook on how you could try this yourself, and then some fun giveaway items that sat on your desk and reminded you of their brand,
Mm.
and had a really good response rate. I mean, um, who doesn't respond to someone who sends you something that's helpful, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, and that's going to be showed out in the kind of recent kind of data, which is showing that, interestingly, sales kind of emails are going through the roof, but response rates are way down.
Yeah,
But at the same time, marketing emails are also going up, but actually response rates are way up, and click
yep,
throughs are way up, and conversion rates are way up.
yep,
So anybody who is thinking about, if you actually, the best way to success is to be helpful, to be useful, to be
yep,
valuable, to be informative. And if you do
yep.
that, if you have your kind of like, it's not necessarily about your targets, but it's about kind of just, if you help your customers be successful, then you're just going to build your brand and your equity and your relationship and everything else.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and there's a lot of a lot of people have been writing and studying this, but some of the best brands that emerge from times like this have that exact thought that you're saying. They're here to educate. They're patient with their audiences. They understand that as long as they're educating and creating that brand affinity, that when they can afford to buy, they will, and it will be
Mm.
from the brands that they know and trust, right? So
Yeah.
it's a good strategy.
But I think that what's interesting is that direct mail is still considered to be quite, quite traditional, and it sometimes can be considered to be quite unfashionable. But
Hmm.
despite the fact that it can be more effective than, other digital or email kind of campaign formats. I mean, so why do you think that more brands are not using kind of direct mail?
I think there's two things. I think one is that there's a certain generation of people that are in the business world that are decision makers, and people that are actually employing these tactics that have literally not been exposed to direct mail at scale, right?
Mm.
I mean, I think about my kids. Uh, they When I was a kid, and I won't even tell you how long ago that was, I would wait for the mail. I'd get excited when my mom checked it. I'd want to help
Sure.
open it.
Yeah.
And now it's just not as big of a deal, right? Like we pay all of our bills online. Maybe you get some coupons in the mail, or some correspondence from your family, but it's really not as big of a channel anymore. So I think there's the exposure issue, but there's also the perception that it's not measurable, that it's more of a batch and blast sort of thing, and that it is not part of a modern technology stack,
Right.
which is where I think some of the new emerging technologies play in. Is it is connected to the tech stack. It is easy to get up and running. It is measurable.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the first half of the battle is just reminding, or not even reminding, but educating people that might not have even known about it in the first place, that this does exist and it's not a heavy lift,
Yeah.
and how you can run it programmatically.
Okay. I
Um,
mean, and do you think because I know that kind of direct mail campaigns can actually create a lot of waste. I mean,
Yep.
similarly, email campaigns can create a lot of kind of waste, particularly kind of like in terms of deletion rates, energy use, and all that sort of stuff. It's just almost like it doesn't feel like a physical waste, but it is
Yeah.
still kind of energy kind of like use. I mean, do you think that there's a sustainability angle to this that might be holding kind of like clients kind of back, or more brands using kind of direct mail? And if so, are you helping people navigate that sort of stuff?
Yeah. So there's a couple different, there's a couple different strategies there. I think, the first is, if we do have a client that has a large TAM, like size of audience, then
Mm,
we do work with them to make sure that the packaging is very sustainable, meaning that it's recycled, meaning that that there's not a lot of extra waste in the box. Like if there's a package that can fit in a certain size box, you're not going to a size up. So those sorts of strategies.
yeah,
I think the more modern trend that's starting to emerge is with this new work from home environment.
yeah,
One of our most recent product features was actually an address confirmation feature.
right.
Uh, so you don't want to be sending a package to an office, because 9 times out of 10 there's no one there to sign for it, and it just sits there and creates the waste that you're talking about, right?
Sure.
So now with address confirmation, people are actually saying, yes, I do want to receive this, which a reduces the amount that you're actually sending, because it
Hmm.
will really just hit the people that want to know more.
Yeah.
And then secondarily, it lands to an actual recipient that's going to unbox it and use it versus just throwing it away.
Well,
So
no,
the,
indeed. I mean, so do you think that? I mean, do you think that? But is sustainability, you think, a thing? I mean, is that? I mean, it just makes me think that, is there, should you be kind of like helping your clients always, well, put together like a carbon footprint calculator, so they go, oh, if we want to do this, this is kind of what we have to do, sort of thing, to help them kind of build that, sustainability kind of mindset. Because a lot of times people don't do things because they think it's not sustainable, if you know what I
Mhm.
mean. I
Yeah,
mean, is that something that you're thinking about?
it's definitely something that, so one of our co-founders, Braden Young, and I have talked about it quite a bit in terms of just corporate social responsibility.
Mm,
And as our footprint grows and we're doing more and more sending, we're definitely looking for ways to help our customers figure that out. I think
mm,
a carbon footprint uh, calculator is super interesting. I think even just kind of going back to like our own product and working on a lot of different advancements to make sure that um, that the packaging is sourced responsibly, that it's optimized for like the exact size that you would need versus any waste there.
yeah, yeah.
We're really thinking about it from like multiple levels.
Oh, awesome. I mean, because I think it feels like it's we're in one crisis right now, but we're in one crisis within an even bigger one,
Exactly.
in
Yeah.
many ways. So
Yeah.
it's like we're going to think that things, when we're out of this kind of like this coronavirus kind of outbreak, or when we think we're out of it, we're going to reemerge into, oh, everything's not rosy. We've still got other things that we need to tackle.
Yeah.
And so
And
that's,
you're bringing me down.
oh man, sorry man. I just kind of like, you know, I think we just need to. It's one of those kind of things. It's a bit like, it's almost this current crisis is forcing us to accelerate our thinking and
Yeah.
our understanding of things. I think that's kind of one of the big things that I'm kind of like seeing,
Yeah.
is that the amount of things that are getting done in the shortest of times, where normally it would take weeks, if not months, if not years, to get things done. But because it's always fascinating to me to see how constraints, if you apply constraints, whether they are constraints you apply on yourself or constraints that get applied to you, can be the provide a huge impetus to creativity and innovative thinking and problem solving and all of that sort of stuff. And I hope that we don't lose the mindset and lose the momentum as we come out of this, and we
Yeah.
can take that learning and kind of that momentum through into kind of other things and other challenges that we face.
Yeah. No, exactly. And I think, I mean, I tend to be an optimist, and I think there's a whole generation that's just sitting there right at the cusp of taking over, quite frankly, and
Yeah.
not letting people forget as well,
Yeah.
which gives me hope.
Awesome. I mean, so like, here's the thing, Dan. I mean, like, so that's all great, and you're doing this, and I think it's, the opportunity to do some really cool stuff. The kind of direct mail is great, and I wish more kind of brands would kind of like think about how they add that to their mix, particularly if it fits with the experience that they want to deliver to their their clients or their potential kind of new clients. I mean, but from your experience and the brands that you kind of work with, I mean, there's a lot of people there. There's a lot of activity, a lot of people getting involved and trying to help improve the experience that they deliver customers, clients, consumers, whatever. But in your experience, your sort of broad experience, I mean, what do you think kind of people should be doing? What are they missing out? Kind of what would be your best advice if I was to say to you, somebody wants to improve their experience that they deliver to their clients, they should do X or Y first? What would you say?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think one of the topics that popped into my brain probably in mid-March, when all of COVID really started to become more pronounced,
Mm-hmm.
was that the term hyper relevance. And
Right.
really what that is it's leaning into your audiences and really understanding what they care about,
Mm.
and crafting your message to what they care about,
Mm.
making sure that your product actually solves for what they care about,
Mm-hmm.
and being really lockstep in a very, very relevant way. And to me, that's just the core of a really great customer or prospect experience is, um, the brands that take the extra time to really understand that versus just throwing things at people and hoping that the law of numbers will give them a certain conversion rate.
Yeah.
I really think is what's going to win. I think I think that's somewhat of a permanent change, honestly.
Yeah, it's. I mean, I think it's fascinating. It almost feels like we've got to remember that at the end of everything is a person or
Yeah.
a group of people, and that sometimes we've got to get out of our own way to get to know them better, and that might be sort of like we need to kind of not hide behind our laptops or our 3-screen kind of display units in our office or our
Yeah.
meetings or our dashboards or our analytic data visualizations and
Yeah.
all those different things, and actually just go and talk to people
Yeah.
and really get to know them, get to understand kind of what's important to them, what the priorities are, what their motivations are. Don't guess about it, and don't be informed by data,
Yeah.
absolutely, but understand that there's a great quote that I love, comes from a gentleman by the name of Joseph Krzyzewski, who's a Polish-American language scholar or linguistic scholar, I think. And he said, the map is not the territory. And I think it's a great quote because it sort of suggests that people are more than their data.
Mm.
And the best actually understand that, and therefore make the extra effort to get to see the whole customer and understand the whole customer,
Yeah.
and not just rely on the data.
Yeah. That's pretty fascinating. I like that quote a lot.
Yeah. So Dan, I mean, what I also wanted to ask you about, and this is what I ask many people about, is I wanted to ask about this idea that, to think forward about what are some of the big things that you see coming down the track that you think, this is where I think the future is going to look like, or this is what I think some of the key challenges are. Because it's always nice to get that kind of like forward-looking sort of perspective, I feel, from people that are doing interesting stuff in this space.
Yeah. I think I think the road ahead of us is going to be a very interesting one. I think that there's just so many unknowns, of an economic and like pandemic event like this in modern history,
Hmm.
that as fast as things started to close, they will open up just as quickly. I think the level of how comfortable people feel, particularly on the B2B side, in terms of, will they feel comfortable returning back to an office every day? Will they feel comfortable going to a field event? Will they feel comfortable going and traveling to visit a client face to face? Is highly unknown. I
Yes.
think depending on, I just Google, Facebook, Salesforce have all pretty much announced that their employees can work from home for the rest of the year. So a lot of those kind of bigger tech companies usually make the decision for everyone, quite frankly.
Yeah.
So I think the, B2B marketers, sellers, CX professionals really have to lean into what a world looks like without some of the traditional things at their disposal. Like,
Right.
So to me, it's going to be all about leaning into how operationally sound your teams are. So I think to your point around your quote, it's we have to have very well defined maps to find the territory, but then we actually need to get on the ground in those territories.
Yeah.
To really see it for ourselves.
Yeah.
So I think that the best teams are going to have their map just figured out in the background. And then they're going to spend their time exploring that topography and actually, refining the map, quite frankly.
Yeah, no, and that's going to, it's going to take a lot of kind of virtual shoe leather.
Yes, that it will.
So, Dan, thank you for that. I mean, is there anything else that you'd like to add that we've kind of missed out that you'd like to mention about, Sendoso and the work that you're doing before I ask you a couple of final questions that I just do for fun at the end of these things?
No, I think we've covered everything. The last thing I would leave anyone with in terms of our technology is it performs at a higher level than digital. It's table stakes as part of any modern sales, marketing, CX tech stack, and something that definitely replaces a lot of what's been taken away, which is that physical in-person relationship and connection.
Perfect. Thank you. So the last thing I wanted to ask you, Dan, was this so I've been doing ever since, so I published a new book rather, kind of like summer of last year, and it's called Punk CX. And we talked about this kind of before, about the kind of the basic premise that, punk rock exploded out of prog rock in the 1970s as a reaction to its overly complicated, self-indulgent sort of means. And punk was this DIY democratic, dare to be different approach. And it struck me when I was thinking about that the experience industry or space feels a lot like prog rock did in the 1970s. It's kind of overly codified, certified, frameworked, benchmarked, yada, yada, yada sort of thing. And it struck me as if, well, if that's true, then what would a punk version of CX look like? And that's kind of the basic kind of premise, right? And so what I've been doing as part of the ends of these interviews, I've been doing these ongoing sort of like social kind of research, as it were, because I'm not saying that punk is this and not that. And kind of punk is just this more of this mindset sort of thing. So I've been asking people two kind of like almost like word or association kind of questions. Like, and the first one is, what one or two words do you think would describe a punk approach to CX?
That's an interesting question. Probably, I'd say social movement.
Cool. That's good. I mean, because I'm collecting them, and I tell you what, I have got a huge range of words and expressions, everything from genuine, unique, easy to recognize, straightforward, to live, confrontational, authentic, challenging, passionate, to anti-easy listening, to headless architecture, to all sorts of different things. And I love it because it shows that actually punk or a punk approach can be such a broad church.
Yeah.
And so that's my ongoing kind of piece. But the second one that I've been asking people is, given what you've kind of like said, what company or brand do you think epitomizes that sort of punk CX ethos?
Oh gosh, there's so many emerging brands. On the consumer or the B2B side?
Oh, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, man. It could be anything. Yeah. I mean, you could turn around. It doesn't need to be a new one. It could be an old one. You say like they were punk at the start and they're still punk.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of think about, and I haven't followed them in a while, but I always thought that Converse was
Right.
pretty punk, um, especially when they started to go a little bit more mainstream with their own storefronts, but still the ability to go in and do your own customized all stars.
Uh-huh.
Really maintain that like uniqueness and individualism, because I think that's kind of at the core of punk rock is that combined social movement, but then also like your unique take on it.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's great. I like it. So, Dan, that's good. That's great. That's it. That's what I have. And first of all, I want to say thank you for your thoughts on the punk questions. Those are always kind of like sometimes they have people stumbling. We end up with kind of these kind of like deathly silences. But thank you for kind of like not keeping us hanging on too long and actually kind of like producing some great answers, which is brilliant. I want to thank you also for sharing your kind of sharing your insight and your experience with us about Sendoso and what you're doing in direct mail to give it a kind of like a a technological lick, as it were, to bring it into the 21st century. Because I think it's a channel and a method or a means that can be incredibly effective and isn't necessarily used as much as it might be. But so just to say congrats on that. Thank you for sharing your insight and experience. It's been a pleasure talking to you today.
Yeah, a pleasure as well. Thanks so much.
Well, that was cool. I hope you enjoyed it. I did, and I always do actually, because I always learn something new when I speak to some of these amazing kind of people. And it's always something new that I can incorporate into my writing, speaking, workshops, and other sort of advisory work that I do. Now, if you're interested in learning about any of that sort of stuff, then you can find out more about how I work with clients over at adrianswinscoe.com. One final thing before I go, please consider heading over to iTunes or Spotify or whichever podcast platform you choose to use, and do leave a review. Every little helps, as they say. Anyway, that's all for now. Thank you for listening, and do tune in again soon. All the very best. Cheers. Bye.